Hello and welcome to How To, a series of complete and comprehensive guides where I teach you how to do things. Today we'll be looking at the fairy with the feistiest attitude in Predecessor, the FEY.
We are ancient. You are nothing.
How this works is I do an overview of the hero with a breakdown of each ability in detail on how they work and tips on how to use them. After that, I'll give you a brief rundown on what types of items best fit the hero. Then I'll go over what I feel are the best lanes to play them in and which heroes they pair well with. At the end, I'll list a few of their key points, strengths, and weaknesses. So without further ado, let's get into it. The FEY is a heavy-hitting mid laner with a passion for fast attacks and annihilating flower power. Her best features come from the output speed of magic damage from her quick cooldowns and locking her enemies in place with a devastating ult. As a mid laner, FEY strives for magical power along with ability haste to dish out as much damage as possible as fast as she can. Let's check out her abilities. Note, hero abilities scale per every third level until level 18 with ability damage, cooldowns, and mana consumptions. A frequently changing game like this means that any given number or percentage is subject to change. Starting with her passive, Nature's Vengeance. Each time you take down an enemy, the FEY will spawn an Untamed Growth, which is her first ability. You'll also gain a 15% movement speed for 5 seconds upon the enemy's death. This benefits from team fights when everyone is grouped in a small area. It's not something you pay attention to primarily, but surprises you when the additional damage happens to take out an enemy after you've already blown your whole kit. Her primary is a ranged attack that sends out a lovely flower with a nasty bite, dealing 60 base physical damage along with a 60% of your overall physical attack power, which scales as she levels or obtains items. For those of you wondering, that is a base 60 physical plus, let's say she has 70 attack power. 60% of 70 is 42, giving her a total of 102 physical damage per attack. Again, things like these are subject to change. Moving on to her bread and butter for minion cleanup is her Untamed Growth. This ability throws out a generous AoE that dishes out magical damage over time, exploding after 2.5 seconds. 50% of the damage is dealt over the 2.5 seconds, with the other additional 50% dealt upon its explosive end. Untamed Growth is, as I said, a minion killer. It's her main way to clear waves fast, and it assists with keeping any melee heroes off the wave. This ability also comes into play when multiple enemies are in sight, as it has a wide AoE, giving you lots of room to hit anyone bundled up, i.e., it's great for teamfights. The FEY's next ability comes into play when that speed demon enemy is just about to get away. Bramble Patch is a thorny, bramble that launches out in a straight line, slowing any enemy caught in it by 40% for 0.5 seconds, disappearing after 5 seconds. The benefit of this slow really helps when an enemy is running from you or towards you. Bramble Patch can also phase through terrain, meaning anyone on the other side of a wall is not safe from a slow thorny demise. This ability is also helpful in early game when your Untamed Growth isn't clearing a wave fast enough. Simply place it in the line of the minions to help with damage or slow them to keep them away from the tower. Next up is Harvest Nettles. My personal favorite from her roster, this is an orb the FEY throws at an increased range. Hitting an enemy hero or eliminating a minion with the Harvest Nettles will refund you 75% of its mana cost. This helps keep you in lane without a quick loss of mana. Hitting the same target within 6 seconds deals an increased percentage of damage, which can be stacked up to 3 times. This is incredible for long range damage when you don't want to get too close. Just make sure not to miss. This ability has a very fast cooldown time, so it makes it one of her essentials for starting fights before unloading her abilities. Last but not least, the Mother of Mayhem, Flytrap. This ultimate ability brings forth a giant flytrap, latching to anyone in its AoE before pulling them into its center, stunning them for 1 second. This ult can be a massive game changer when it's used right and placed properly. This can turn the tides for teamfights very quickly with the amount of damage it can do, and the additional stun, leaving room for you to toss other abilities on top of it. Cautionary tale, however, enemies with cleanse abilities or items can make their way out of the fly trap, so you want to pay attention for when it's the right time to use it. Barraging the enemies with all other abilities after placing the fly trap sets up a massive amount of damage, so be sure they're not on cooldown. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the FEY. As a mid laner, she's placed in quite an open space, and with none of her abilities allowing for a quick escape, you'll need to focus on distance, vision, and map awareness. I'm not going to go into too much detail as far as how mid lane is played, that's saved for another video, but I will help you out with this hero. Since she has really good range for abilities, focus on using her Untamed Growth for a long range minion clear, as well as her Harvest Nettles to make sure you're not draining all of your mana early game. If you're in a bad spot, try using your Bramble Patch to slow the enemy down while you make your escape. If you're in a really bad spot, throw your ult down. Anything after that can be labeled as you being out of position or not having vision to sight an incoming enemy. Or they outplayed you and there's nothing you can do about that. A hero without an escape has to focus on positioning and have good map awareness. When it comes to fights, distance is her best asset. Use her Harvest Nettles to get as much damage on an enemy before they close the gap. In between those, use your Bramble Patch to slow them, and if you have an item that gives your abilities a slow effect, toss down your Untamed Growth. Specifically inside the Bramble Patch, so that they're stuck inside, taking damage over time and continuously getting slowed. Do this all whilst backing away, because if they do reach you, you are again not going to have a good way of escaping, so it's best to keep your distance. Or you can always use an item that should never have been in the game in the first place, which is your Blink. After throwing your ult is when you want to blow your entire arsenal. Follow it with Untamed Growth for the additional AoE damage while they're trapped inside, and immediately follow that with your Bramble Patch to slow anyone from getting out too quickly. After that, it's all Harvest Nettles until your next ability comes off cooldown. A great side effect from doing that is that if you do manage to take anyone down, your passive will drop another Untamed Growth, keeping you consistent damage on the battlefield. The FEY has an overall burst effect on her when she drops all of her abilities at once, and it shows. Now let's take a look at some good item types to build with her. Based solely off of her being a mage, you want to build magical power to boost your abilities, percentage of additional magical power, and of course mana. All mage items give you magical power, but with FEY having a deadly fast cooldown with her Harvest Nettles, you want to look towards items with haste to decrease the cooldown time. For more sustain, you can look into items with mana regen or even magical lifesteal to keep yourself from backing too often due to low mana or health. For hard hitting and fast eliminations, you want to look for items with more power and max mana. Usually heavier power items won't come with mana regen, but instead a max mana increasing your pool of mana you hold. Seeing how the FEY has a lack of escapes, it would also benefit you to get at least one movement speed item. With that, you'll also want to grab some items with ability penetration in case the enemy team is building more magical armor than usual. All that being said, your item selection really depends on what the enemy team is building. Watch what items they use and try to counter. Now as far as lanes go, mages tend to normally revolve around mid lane, especially ranged ones. So for first suggestions, I recommend using her in mid lane as much as possible to get used to her. That being said, you can use the FEY as a support character in the safe lane or off lane roles. As a support, you don't offer much for healing or shields, and her CC, or crowd control for those of you who don't know what that stands for, isn't the greatest for stopping an enemy. Since her Bramble Patch only slows and only does so for a very short duration, the only other CC she holds is in her ultimate, and you want to use that sparingly in the support role. Save it for teamfights or dire situations. So with that, she strives better with passive support items that give beneficial AoE effects to the carry, along with ability haste and mana regen to stay in lane with your carry for as long as possible. Her Harvest Nettles help out a lot in this role with getting easy damage on the enemy to set up your carry for the elimination. Your Bramble Patch also helps in slowing enemies so that the carry can reach them in time or get away. Other than that, focus on damaging the enemy from afar without using too much mana, and help clear the wave of minions if it starts crashing into your tower. The offlane role is not one that I recommend, even though it can be done. This lane puts you in a much riskier position to get collapsed on from the enemy jungler. With her not having too much escape, it sets her up for failure, but if you are confident with your positioning and you have good ward placement and map awareness, then go for it. As far as item building, it's pretty much the same as mid lane. Now, to get into team comps, the FEY pairs really well with other heroes that have good crowd control. Steel, Richter, and Grux are the first few that benefit her very well. They all have a large portion of crowd control and ways of getting the enemies together and stunned. Combine their CC with your ultimate and it's an immediate death trap. As a support in safe lane, she pairs well with someone who has their own escape, that way you're both not caught slacking. Murdoch, Kira, and kind of Twin Blast are the ones that work well with her. Other than that, it's really pairing her with someone who can lock a large portion of enemies down. And again, as the game progresses, the more heroes there are going to be, so just look for the ones that can do that. So with all that said, let's go over the key points of the FEY. Number 1. Heavy hitting fast abilities mean you want high magical power and ability haste for items. Number 2. Keep your distance to not get caught out since she lacks mobility, and keep map awareness with wards and callouts. Number 3. Unload your kit immediately after your ult when you enter a team fight to clear off as much damage as possible, but watch for timing. And number 4. Try pairing her with other heroes that have a high amount of crowd control for devastating your opponents. And with this video on how to FEY, you now have a better shot at wiping your enemies away and taking the core. But hey, I'm no pro, and these are just my thoughts and observations from playing her. So with that said, this is the end of the video. Comment your thoughts down below on what you think of the FEY, let me know if I missed anything, and let me know what hero you'd like me to cover in the next how-to video. Be sure to check out my other how-to videos to see if there's something you might like. And of course, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon for when the next how-to video comes out. And with that, I will see you all in the next video. Be jolly.